All right, welcome everyone to today's Skill Up. My name is Emily Springer, and I'm the manager of the Academic Training Academy here at National University. And I'm joined by my fabulous colleagues here at NU, Dr. Kelly Tribble and Dr. Chad Becker. And they are the IRB experts really to turn to at National University. A couple of very brief mentionings before we dive in. Questions are welcome in the chat. Dr. Kelly Tribble will be your go-to expert there. So if you see him answering any questions in the chat, just know that he is the IRB representative to turn to. If you have any technical needs, you can find me in the chat as well too. Happy to help as well. And I know that Dr. Becker is going to cover some other things. So without further ado, that covers all of the technical aspects I needed to chat about. And I'm turning it over to you, Dr. Becker.
Thank you so much, Dr. Springer. Welcome everyone to our NU IRB webinar. Today's topic is recruitment, informed consent, materials and process, and then a few application components that I want to show you that are related to those elements. So you've had a chance to read the description. It's been up on the screen for a while, and of course you saw it when you signed up. Essentially repeats what I just said there, but we're looking forward to that today. I'm calling in from Terre Haute, Indiana, where it is hot, sunny, and humid. We have corn sweat here, which I know Dr. Springer is well aware of as well. If anyone lives in the Midwest, you know that that can raise your humidity and temperature by quite a bit. Looking forward to reading the chat later, seeing where folks are coming in from. Dr. Springer, do we have the Q&A function as well as the chat today?
Great question. Let's go ahead and make sure that's enabled. We should have that enabled for our participants.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
So we're going to pull both of those at the end, and I'll be creating a document out of that. So feel free to enter questions, where you're from. I think what the weather is like was our question of the day, where you're from. And we're going to get started here. So I'd just like to introduce myself briefly. I'm the IRB education analyst, along with my colleague, Dr. Kelly Tribble, who's here today, also IRB education analyst. You'll be seeing and hearing from him throughout the webinar as we kind of discuss questions and some ideas that we are presenting today. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Tribble as well. Why don't you come on real quick, Kelly, and tell us where you are?
Yes, thanks everyone. Nice to see you, everybody. A lot of you have known me through office hours and sessions and things like that, but would welcome to see any of you again. I'm in East Texas and it's hot and humid here, but I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. And my preference really, if you have a question, to put it in the Q&A, and if you have just kind of a comment or a question maybe about the logistics of I've lost my audio or something like that, the kind of thing we can reserve for the chat. But if you have a question that you'd like me to either pass to Chad or answer for the group in the Q&A, I'll be glad to do that.
Thanks. And a special thanks to Dr. Emily Springer for hosting our session today. And we really appreciate that. So thank you. And we're going to get started. So Dr. Springer mentioned some of this. We have a Skill Up YouTube channel that I've hyperlinked here. We have our IRB places that you can find the recorded webinar as well. And then the question and answer, I will have this posted on our website. I'll also send the completed Q&A to Dr. Springer before she sends her follow-up email out. And I'm also going to include a little survey with that. So if you're interested in filling out a 5-question survey about the webinar, I appreciate that. So we'll make sure to get you the PowerPoint, the recording, the Q&A, and the link to the webinar. I'm sorry, the link to the survey here at the end of our session, probably within 24 hours. Just really briefly, we're going to talk about the purpose of the IRB, and then we're going to get into the real nuts and bolts of our presentation. So the IRB is a committee that's designated by the federal government through the Common Rule to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects in research. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we do. And you'll see several hyperlinks throughout this. So when you do receive this PowerPoint presentation, you can follow the hyperlinks throughout the presentation to see pretty much everything that I'm presenting here today in a bit more detail. So if you wanted to, you could certainly link to this HHS, Department of Health and Human Services website description of the Common Rule. What we're not is we're not really helping any researchers with their programmatic aspects of their students, with their methodological aspects of research, unless those components themselves present risk. Sometimes what people decide to do and how they decide to do their research can be risky, even if the subject itself isn't. So we won't worry about your research design. We're more interested in protecting human subjects. So some key information about the IRB here at NU is that our services and resources are open to all NU community members, no matter what type of community member you are. If you're a student, faculty, staff, administrator, students, undergraduate, graduate students, both can utilize our services and resources at any time. I'll be talking about those services and resources in a few minutes, but student PIs, principal investigators, so if you hear me say PI throughout, that's what I'm referring to. The person who's leading the study, the person who's applied, right? The student who has applied. So student PIs can utilize our services at any point in the program. So you don't need to be in a certain course to come and utilize us as a resource. You can start with us at any point that you feel like you want to. Dissertation student PIs do not need to be enrolled in any specific course, and you'll note here a few that are common for our dissertation students. So please do consider the IRB before you need us, because that can help you expedite your program. Our preview for the webinar today is just briefly to inform you about what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to talk about those resources and services, and then we'll get into the topic today, which is informed consent, which includes recruitment, consent, and then some special situations like researching with minors, researching in normal education settings, which we do get a lot of questions about, and how that differs from just typical research with minors or adults. And then I have some application views to show you as examples for what it kind of looks like inside our application system regarding those components like recruitment, consent. All right. I will be showing you some views of our website, but I'm not going to go to our website and click around. But I do want to have this launching pad for you. These, again, are all hyperlinked. So each of these will take you to a specific web page on our website devoted to what's listed on the left-hand side. So we have elements to help you get started and learn about our policies. We have templates, we have services, we have help materials, we have a YouTube channel, and various other components that you can utilize to learn about our process, learn about our materials, and become familiar with the IRB. So those are our resources. We also have services where you can sign up for. So these are regularly occurring and self-schedulable. If you click on these links, you will be taken to the page where you can learn about and sign up for group sessions. They're small group sessions, about 6 to 8 people. And you can learn about and get help with your own materials. So eligibility, recruitment, and consent materials can all be reviewed and discussed in these group sessions. Granted, you submit it ahead of time. So when you register, you'll be able to submit your eligibility criteria or your recruitment material or your consent material for that session, get help, and learn as well. We have an application group session that doesn't have anything to submit. We won't be reviewing your application before you actually submit that, but you can come to this session and learn about how to complete our application. You'll see Dr. Tribble in all of these sessions, and does a great job helping people understand these key components to applications. You can also sign up for Office 15 minutes. We call them office hours, but each one is 15 minutes. And you can have a one-on-one conversation to ask deeper questions, maybe more complicated questions than you can have answered through our sessions. We have webinars, obviously, one today, but we also have a web page with all of the recordings, PowerPoint presentations, and Q&As from our previous webinars for the last about 2 years. So you can go and see, you can even go and look at the last time we did this presentation about 9 months ago and see if I got any better or if I got any worse. But the resources are there for you to utilize, and we want to just make sure that you know where to find them. All right, so probably not too many questions yet coming in, but now that we're getting into our informed consent, our material for today, you may have questions. Please feel free to type those in the Q&A. Again, we won't be stopping and having anybody ask their question live. We'll just be attending to questions as we go, and I'll look forward to putting together that Q&A document to send you after the session. So informed consent is a process, and it's something that's granted to researchers by participants. It's really the crux of ethical research. They're giving you their consent to be part of your study. Informed means that you have told them about the risks and benefits. So we need to make sure that you're doing that and doing that in an appropriate way. So we have materials and processes by which you can go ahead and get consent from your participants, which is the voluntary participation in your research. So we need to be able to see that you have structured your research so that you do get this informed consent from your participants before you start collecting your data. Sorry about that. It is a combination of recruitment and consent. So when we talk about informed consent, we don't just mean that form that they agree to. We talk about the whole process of reaching out to them and gaining that consent from them. So recruitment is part of that. And we'll talk about recruitment specifically in this session. We'll talk about the consent material, the consent form and process specifically in this session as well. It might lead to a yes. We hope that it leads to a yes, but it could also lead to a no. And it's important to acknowledge that as a researcher, that not everyone who answers your recruitment request will end up being in your study. And of course, they can stop at any time they want. After the first question, after the next to last question, before any questions are asked, they have that right, once they give to consent, to revoke it as well. So keep all that in mind as you think about getting the right number of people for your study and about being able to get the consent from those folks in order to complete your research. For the materials, I want to show you a couple of screenshots from our website. So if you follow those links that I had provided earlier, you'll see these boxes on the recruitment page. Okay. One on the left-hand side has all of the templates that we expect you to use. You can see there's quite a few here, and that's because there are different types of recruitment. We have kind of the survey that you'll put online that'll have a page in front of it, all the way to an email that you might send specifically to a person, and possibly a flyer that you might post or hand out. Social media should be structured in a certain way to be as efficient and effective as possible. So we have a template to help you do that. We have some examples. And then if you're reading down here below, we actually have some extra templates that I'll be talking about later for specific types of research circumstances. Most of you will probably be using the top 3 here, depending on what type of study you're doing, if you're researching with adults. And of course, human subjects. So when recruitment materials are needed are when you need people. That's as simple as that. If you're doing an existing data study, you're not going to be providing us with recruitment materials. You're not going to be telling us how you're going to be recruiting people, because that's already happened and someone has already collected that data, and now you're accessing that data. So most of our researchers here at the university, especially our student researchers, do use human subjects research, which is why this is such an important part of our IRB work. So here's an example look at our template. These are the instructions, and I've highlighted just a few areas here that you can look at real quickly to get a sense of what's required in this template. We need to make sure that you're providing people the appropriate types of information so that they can be informed about your study. Give you just a second longer to look at that. We have things like who you are, what you're asking for, research activities, locations, time commitments, right? So that they know what they're getting into. We're going to ask you to tell them what topics you're going to ask about. We don't want anybody to be surprised when they get to, say, your interview, and all of a sudden you're asking them questions that they weren't expecting. So the recruitment materials contain information that can help someone fully understand your study and make that decision to volunteer to be in it. This is a look at the actual template just below those instructions. And you can see we have highlighted blue areas that you will remove and replace with the text for your study. So briefly describe the purpose, you would remove that, put in your purpose. List the eligibility criteria, you would remove the blue highlighting and put in your eligibility criteria. So we do try to make these templates as user-friendly as possible. I'll stop here after this slide and ask if we have any questions, because we'll kind of wrap up recruitment really quickly. But before we do that, you've learned about the templates, you've learned about when you need to use them. And now we're going to look a little, just for a moment, at the process of recruiting. So common ways to reach out to people are through email, through social media posts, Facebook, LinkedIn, others, flyers that are put on the wall somewhere or actually handed out to people in a public place. We don't see these too often, but of course, we used to do a lot of research through reaching out through phone calls and presentations sometimes, depending on the context. If you are someone who has groups of people that you present to, perhaps that is an effective way to reach the people that you are trying to study. Maybe you can get permission to go into a setting to give a presentation. So we see those, but we don't see them quite frequently as emails, social media posts, and flyers. So when you're recruiting, you need to consider not only who you're recruiting, but how you're going to reach out to them and what you're going to reach out to them with to grab their attention and kind of interest them in volunteering to be in your study. All right, so I'll pause for a second and see, Dr. Kelly, if we have any questions that have come in.
Hey, we've had a couple come in. In fact, I was furiously typing an answer to one, and I might have missed it if you covered this, but something that has come up is the concept of snowball sampling and kind of how that works, especially over social media.
Sure. So yes, snowball sampling is not in and of itself a sampling technique. It's added on after the initial technique. Once you reach some people, they may know others who would be interested in your study. And so if you make that part of your proposal, we have a box for you to check. Say you're going to email people, and then you're also going to use snowball sampling. The expectation would be that the people that you email would then think about who they might forward that email to in their collegial atmosphere. They might know some people who would be eligible for your study, and they can pass it along to those people. If it's social media, same thing. You could copy it off of Facebook and send it as an email attachment. You could forward it in the Facebook platform to someone that you know. So as long as the participant is doing it, we don't need to see necessarily who they're doing it with. We just expect that they would forward the same recruitment material that you had provided them. So when you're recruiting, in kind of doing your consenting and your data collection, you can ask participants if they know anybody that might want to be in the study. So it can happen right away as soon as they receive their recruitment email. Maybe it happens after your data collection and they really enjoyed the interview or focus group or survey that you had them do, and now they've realized, oh, I know people. So it's worth it sometimes, especially when you're having difficulty finding enough participants, to ask your current future participants if they know anyone who might be eligible and interested. So
And
that's
Dr. Becker, I'm so glad you touched on this, because this is actually a question that came in prior to us doing today's session. But to clarify, Dr. Becker, when you do snowball sampling, it's in addition to another type of technique. So for example, if I do criterion sampling, I can then also do snowball sampling on top of that, and
right.
that would have to be indicated in my application with the IRB, correct?
That's correct.
All right.
Yes, the analogy is useful, right? When you think about a snowball rolling down a hill, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and gains momentum, and all of a sudden now you have the study size that you need. But it has to start with something, right? And that something is your initial recruitment strategy. So we would need to see in a human subjects research how you were initiating that. And then we would also need to know that you were going to be asking whoever you recruited through that initial recruitment strategy if they knew anyone that might be interested in the study. So thank you for helping clarify that. It would be in addition to any other type of recruitment strategy that you would have employed. All right. That is a good question and not something I was planning on discussing. So thank you both, all three of you, the question answer and Kelly and Emily for that. All right. So moving forward then, this is where we talk about a little, just for a moment, site permission. So site permission and recruitment are linked, but they are different. So not everyone needs site permission. It depends if you're utilizing resources that aren't yours. So if you are recruiting on your own social media wall page, that's your resource and you do not need permission for that. If you are using someone else's page, you do need permission for it. So same with physical spaces. If you're going to be interviewing people on Zoom, you don't need permission from Zoom to do that. But if you're going to be interviewing them, say where they work in a building that's private, you would need permission for that. Going to be researching in a school, utilizing any of the school's resources, whether they be email, electronic communication systems, actual physical spaces, you would need permission from an authorizing figure. So permission isn't just for physical resources, it's also for virtual resources as well. And site permission would need to be granted and included with your application before recruitment begins. And this is something that confuses some of our researchers. You say, well, how can I reach out if I can't reach out? Well, you're reaching out to someone else, right? You're reaching out to the authorizing figure, getting their permission for the use of the resources that you'll be using to recruit or collect data. So you may ask permission of a principal for email addresses of teachers. That principal could give you that permission. You include that in your application. And then when you receive our approval, you would go to that principal and ask for those email addresses and then send out your recruitment email. So they are two different steps, even though they're intimately linked in many people's studies. Again, not everyone will have a site permission. It just depends on what resources you're using. How about any questions about that? I know we just asked questions, but that's one that we often do get questions about. So if we don't, I can move forward, but
were you talking about, I'm sorry, answering your question?
You're answering questions, site permission. So if there's
Site
anything
permission.
that relates to
I
site
am actually answering one about site permissions as it relates to they're seeking site permission for a social media group or page that they'd like to post a recruitment message to. And typically people are identified, the person granting permission would only be identified by their username and not a real name or a real life name. And would that be acceptable, or would we really hope that they would collect a real name in that situation?
Yes, that is acceptable. We use the platforms as they exist. So if you send a Facebook message to the mediator, manager, moderator of a Facebook site and they reply using, as long as we can tell from the thread that is who you're in communication with, that you've asked the right questions and that you've received an affirmative response. So we have a site permission template on our website. So make sure that your site permission request includes all of the information there. And we will take many different types of site permission, including screenshots of Facebook messages. So if the Facebook conversation goes on larger than your screen, that's okay. Screenshot, scroll up, screenshot, scroll up, screenshot, put those all into a Word file and you have your permission. You could also get a signed letter from somebody through email that you print off or that you download and attach to your application. So we can take site permissions in almost any form as long as it's clear that it is from the authorizing figure needed. All right. Let's get into the consent materials and process now. We've moved through asking for permission for any resources we might need to recruit, to collect data. We've discussed what's needed for recruitment of human subjects in a study as far as the materials and the process goes. Now we've got volunteers who have reached back out to us and they've said, yes, I'm interested in your study. What is the next step? So again, human subjects. For this part of the session, we'll be talking about adults. So people who are 18 years and older. We'll get into minors a little bit later. But typically what we see from our researchers are people who are researching human subjects that are 18 years or over or older, and they're not in a very specific educational setting. They're really just, they want to interview them, they want to focus group them, they want to get in a survey from them, maybe they want to observe them. So this is typically what we see. Probably 85–90% of our applications are adults, human subjects, not in an educational setting. And for these types of studies, you can see from a screenshot from our website on our consent page, which is in the Prepare IRB Documents tab, the different templates that you can use depending on what type of study you're doing. So we have an online survey or questionnaire where someone's doing it anonymously. They're just linking to it. You don't even know who they are, essentially. You're trusting that they are eligible because they met your eligibility criteria and they went to your survey and now they're taking it. We have consent forms for kind of what's not anonymous. So an interview, a focus group, anything that you're going to know who the people are because they have to be in touch with you and you have to get the information with them and from them in some sort of meeting, whether it be in Zoom or in person. So we have a slightly different template depending on whether or not it's anonymous or not. You'll of course keep everybody's identity confidential, but in some studies, you never even learn who they are, right? Those are the anonymous studies. So our consent form, of course, is a little less robust because it doesn't need to be because you don't know who they are. So two different research scenarios. One where it's an online situation, it's anonymous, people are just going to your website. And then the other one where you're more intimately collecting data from them and do know personal information about them. All right, so that's available on our website along with some directions on how to go about getting consent. Here is a look at, very similar to the recruitment, the directions on the consent template. As you can see, it's very similar. The information that you provide here, there's just a little bit more information on the consent form because here's where they're actually consenting rather than just volunteering interest or showing interest in your study. We move to the consent phase of the informed consent process and things get a little bit more complicated. The template is a little bit longer. You can see very much similar to the recruitment template. We have places for you to remove the blue highlighting and put your own information in, working your way through the consent form template, listing eligibility criteria, research activities, topics, risks, benefits. Go ahead and look at that if you haven't already to see the various components that are included in a typical consent form. Now the process is different depending on if you're doing that online anonymous data collection or if you're doing something like an interview, focus group, or observation. So we're going to start with the interview focus group observation process. You would first get our approval because you've submitted a complete application with recruitment, consent, everything in it. You would then recruit your potential participants using the plan that you had proposed to us. Once they reach back out to you and say, yes, I am interested in this, you would provide them a consent form copy. They would have a chance to look at that. And then before the interview, focus group, or observation, you would simply ask them, do you consent? Do you have any questions? If they say, yes, I consent, you can then begin your data collection, your recording. Can't record before you get their consent. So interview situation, you would go to the interview. Someone would come to your Zoom room. You would say, hi, thanks for coming. Before we get started, have you had a chance to review the consent form and do you agree to it? And if they say yes, you can begin your recording and begin your data collection. Same with an observation or focus group. You need to get that verbal consent agreement before you can begin collecting any data or reporting anything. And then if you have multiple activities, you don't have to worry about getting consent for each one. You get it before the first one. So the first one is the consequential one. If you then have them take a survey later, you don't need to get consent from them for the second, third, fourth, however many research activities that you have, because you'll have all the activities listed in the consent form and they'll be agreeing to all of those. All right, so before I switch to the other way of getting consent, let me stop and ask, because this can sometimes be confusing for people, if we have any questions.
We do have a question. It's not really about consent because this is a question about minors, but I'll throw it out there if you want to field it. This one just came in the chat. If we were to collect data from K through 6 students with the school's approval, do parents need to actively opt in, or can they be given the option to opt out?
Yeah, this is a great question, and something we're actually going to cover in about 20 minutes. So in order to not steal my own thunder, I'm going to delay answering that question. And yeah, you'll have all the information you need about that, and probably a few more questions to boot when we do get to that point. So thanks for holding off on that, and we'll talk about minors, especially in educational settings, but also not in educational settings. So this is the one way to gain consent with your adult human research participants. And here is the other way that I had mentioned, if it's an online anonymous survey or questionnaire. So you're going to get our approval again. You're going to show us all your materials. We'll approve it. And then you can recruit. And in your recruitment material, you'll have the link. Right. So if it's a social media post, if it's an email, you'll just embed the link. And if they see your recruitment material and they're interested in being in your study, they'll be able to link directly to your instrument. Perhaps it's a flyer that you're handing out with a QR code. They read your flyer, they say, yeah, this is interesting. They scan your QR code, they're taken to your instrument. The first page of the instrument is the consent form. They click the next button, they click the I agree button, however you format it. That is the giving of their consent. Page 2 would be the beginning of your instrument. So whether it's a survey or a questionnaire, you would have them move past the first consent page to the second page, and that is the consent being given. So they complete your data collection form, and now you have their data. Obviously, this is a few steps shorter and quite a bit easier, but not useful for all types of studies. Just for ones that are looking for, anonymous responses to either survey or questionnaires. All right, we have, again, if you were then to say interview people after they took the survey, you would not need to consent them again as long as all of that information was in the original consent form. So that's an important thing to consider for people who have multiple research activities. Gaining consent once before the first research activity. All right, so now that's adults in a nutshell. And now we're going to move to talking about researching with minors, because it does change. Minors, of course, are not legally able to make their own decisions in these regard, and so their parents or guardians need to be involved. It will be a greater than minimal risk study. We know that just because children are protected populations. So anyone 17 and under would require a full board review, and it will take longer. You'll need the same things, city certification, eligibility criteria, recruitment materials, but how we do the consent changes when it's not an adult. So we include things like parental permission and minor assent. Since you can't consent under the age teen, you assent to your parents' permission. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here. So researching with minors, the first step is to recruit the parents. You have to go through the parents because they are minors, and parents and guardians are they're in charge of the ward. So on the left-hand side, you can see our list again of recruitment materials, but this time we are going to focus on the two bottom ones, the parental recruitment template first. So you need to reach out and recruit parents. Maybe that's through a school email list that you get from the principal. Maybe it's through a parenting social media group with tens of thousands of people on it. However you do it, you need to reach out to the parents first with a material that says something like, I'm looking for, children for this study. If you would be okay with your child being in this study, reach out to me, right? So this is typically the process for getting parental permission first in a research study with minors. The second step would be to gain their permission. So recruit them first, gain their permission second. We have a template for that on our website, and follow it just like the other templates. Remove the highlighted materials and put your own in there. Step 2 completed, you've got parental permission. Now that gives you the permission to go ahead and recruit the child. So that's the third step, recruit minors. Again, we have a minor recruitment template. We actually have two. One is for younger children and one is for older children. The language is just slightly different, but essentially say the same thing. How will you reach out to the children? Often it's through the school as well. Perhaps it's through the parent. So if the parent says, yes, here's permission, I will also put you in contact with the child. Or maybe you already know how to get in contact with the child and you have another plan for recruitment once you get their permission. But we need to know what that process is. We need to see the minor assent template that you're using to get assent from children. And then we need you to go ahead and get that assent. So we have template again with two different forms in it, one for younger children, one for older children. And you can see why we don't get a whole lot of these types of studies, right? It's very complicated with several steps. You are able to research children. We just need to make sure that you've gone through the appropriate channels, have the permission of the parent or guardian, and then recruit the child and get their assent. So it's a little more complicated. There are 4 forms that we would need to see, as well as the process for how the recruitment of both groups is going to happen, how the permission is going to be sent to you, and how you're going to achieve the minor assent as well. All right, a lot of information there. It can be a little confusing when you research with children outside of school, which is what this information relates to. Any questions, Kelly, coming through about this?
I've got an interesting one. Micah asks, if I wish to observe a preschool setting, 3 to 5 years old, will I still need assent forms?
Okay, so our question asker has anticipated our next topic, which is research in a normal educational setting. So again, that was for research outside of an educational setting with minors. You do have to go through a lot of steps to access children. I guess it makes sense that you would have less steps if you were accessing them through an institution like their school, right? So normal educational settings are typically in school, but they're not explicitly in school. We've seen some studies come through with the athletic teams, in Sunday school, other forms of educational situations that are, kind of typical. This could apply, but generally this is the K through 12 setting. So what do we mean by normal educational settings? Well, if we take that example from our question, you are going to be observing children in a classroom. That's pretty typical, right? You're just sitting in the back. You're not imposing anything new or different upon that group of children. So if you can get permission, right, from the principal, you can get permission from the teacher to sit and observe, that would be a pretty typical normal educational setting study. Another normal educational setting study would be something like watching students complete a certain activity, homework, and observing that. Perhaps it would be something that has been instituted curricularly in the school that you want to see the impact of. So it was not your decision to impose this curriculum upon this group of students, but it was happening anyways in the school and you wanted to study it as a teacher or administrator. So often we do see these studies come through from teachers, administrators who have jobs in schools and they want to study something interesting they found in their work. Our example here doesn't necessarily require that person to be from that school. As long as you get permission to be in the school, to be in the classroom, you could be unrelated to the school and still be approvable under this rubric of normal educational settings. So as you can see here, that we have an information letter. And that takes the place of all of those other permissions and assent forms and things like that. So let me show you a little bit more information about this. Normal educational practices do allow the parent or guardian to opt their child's data out of the study. Right? So imagine that the principal says, yeah, we're going to do this. And the teacher says, yeah, we're going to do this. Or it's the teacher themselves who are the PI. So they're obviously going to do this. It's not like you have to throw 4 kids out of the room because their parents opted them out. They're going to be in the room anyways. You're just not going to be able to use any data from the child who's been opted out of the study. So everybody's going to be involved in the everyday educational activity because it's an everyday educational activity. There would be no reason for the child to be removed from that. But as the researcher, you would be responsible for only utilizing the data gathered for the children you did get information that didn't get opt out of the study. So in a situation like this, you may ask a teacher friend, or you yourself as a teacher may send home a letter with your students. If you don't get any letters back or any contact back opting someone out, then you use all of the students' data. If, say, 20 kids are in the classroom and 5 letters are responded to with a no, then you would opt those children's data out of the study and take the other 15. So the impetus is not on you as the researcher to follow up with every parent. You send this home, you send this in an email to the parents, you get this to the parent in some way, and then if you don't hear back, you include their data, right? So it's incumbent upon them to opt their child's data out of the study. And the reason for that is because you've gotten permission from the principal, you've gotten permission from the teacher, there's no harm here, nothing bad is happening, and in fact, they're probably going to benefit from whatever is happening in the class because it's normal educational activity. So the threshold is much different for this type of study than for a study where you're recruiting specific young children to be part of a study voluntarily. So that's why there's some restrictions to it. It has to be a normal educational setting and a normal educational practice. Okay. We have a template for that. And you can do this with adults. So in colleges, in adult education settings, you can also use an information letter if it's an everyday practice within that normal education setting. So again, if it's a college class or some adult education situation where you wanted to do an everyday typical educational setting and practice study, you could send an adult information letter to the adults in the class. And if they decide to opt out, that's their choice. If you don't hear from them, then you can use their data. So we have templates for both the minors and the adults in an everyday educational setting. It is easier, obviously, to do one of these studies if you qualify. And that's the trick, it's hard to qualify because most people want to impose something on a class of students and see the effect of it, right? And if you do that, then that's not an everyday educational situation. All right. Again, we have a template. Here's directions from our template. You can see it's very similar where we write it for you. You essentially just have to put your information in the form. Seen any questions about that, Kelly?
Nope, not at the moment.
It's not very common, but we do sometimes see those types of studies. All right, so here we are now. We're we've been able to discuss adults, minors, and then everyday educational settings. And that pretty much encompasses all of the scenarios in which we see research being done with human subjects through our IRB. Of course, there are some other types of studies like archival data and these kinds of things. There are mixed studies where sometimes people are doing adults and children in normal educational settings, or they're collecting data from parents and children. So you can see how there would need to be layers of different supportive materials with a more complicated study. But these are the typical studies that we see. For applying now, let's kind of take all that information and look at where it goes in the application and how to complete certain pages of the application regarding recruitment, consent, and an information letter. We have these help videos on our webpage. Again, these are hyperlinked, so you can always just bounce to the page that the slide is about. And you can see the different components that we have for help materials on how to get started with your application. Important videos here are how to log in to the platform and begin the application, and then how to complete an application. So if you have about 10 minutes worth of time, you can watch those two videos and pretty much have an idea about how to get in there and get your application started. And now I want to show you some example views of our application. So this one is for a typical study with adults. Okay, and you'll see on after the first few general info pages on the study design page of the application, you're asked some specific questions about your study, questions that will have implications for what the rest of your application requires. So when you start, you'll just see this first section, the general info section, and dependent upon your answers within that section, other sections will open up. So without spending too much time discussing the actual program here itself, I do want to show you a few specific pages. So the study design page is where it asks you who you're going to be studying. And how you answer this will have implications for what your application looks like. In this example, we are studying adults, not in an educational setting. So this is the typical adult study. And you can see that we have a section that has opened up adult recruitment. I'm going to show you that a screenshot of that section so that you have a sense of what is expected of you. I have examples for these other major choices that I'll be going through in just a second. So the adults recruitment page within that study then asks you for how are you recruiting, like what method are you going to use, and then it asks you to upload your recruitment document. So you can see here you have multiple choices and you can choose multiple choices. It's not just choose one. So if you decide that you're going to, really put it out there on email, social media, and flyers, you could choose all three, and then you could upload all three recruitment materials to the application. Many of you will just have one, and that's okay. I'm emailing and here's the email, or I'm social media posting and here's the social media post. But our application allows for multiple entries. Okay, so that's a basic look at what recruitment is within an adult study. Now, consent, you can see we drop down a few pages to the informed consent page. Also asks you how you're doing it and for your form so that we can see it. So yes, these pages are bigger than just the screenshot I'm showing. There's a few more questions that you have to answer on each one of them, but this is the gist of the page and where you will represent what we talked about earlier in the presentation. What's your method for consenting adults? And then show us your consent template that you're using, your consent form. All right. Now let's look at how this changes when we research minors. So you can see on that study design page, instead of choosing adults, we've chosen minors not in an educational setting. Again, nothing to do with that educational setting. This is just researching minors. When we click that, minors, you can see we open up different kinds of sections. Instead of recruitment adults, it's now minors recruitment and parental permission and assent. Different pages open up depending on your answers because we need different information from you. So let's take a look at that minors recruitment tab. Similar to the other recruitment tab, how are you going to do it? And then attach your template so that we can see, how you're reaching out to parents first and then to minors second. So within this recruitment section, we have information for you to upload both how you're recruiting parents, how you're recruiting minors. And then we also have the parental permission and minor assent documents. Again, very complicated to research minors outside of an educational setting, but you can see here that you're prompted for all the information. So as you move through it and as you complete each section, you'll get a check mark and you'll know you're done with that section. Now, our analysts might have feedback for you about what you put in those sections. So getting check marks isn't necessarily, crossing the finish line, but getting check marks on all the sections will allow you to submit it. So in order to get that check mark on this page, you would need to complete all the tasks on it, which include parental permission and assent documents. Again, quite complicated. Moving to the normal educational setting and what it looks like. So back to our study design page, instead of choosing adults or minors not in an educational setting, we've chosen minors in an educational setting. And you can see on this example, we've also chosen cognitively impaired, but that doesn't always obviously apply. So that will just ask you to explain what the impairment might be. Doesn't pop open an extra window. But choosing minors in an educational setting, now you can see it's much less complicated. We're not looking for recruitment. We're not looking for permission. We're not looking for assent. All we're looking for is the info letter. So when you click on the section of the application that opens up upon that choice, you'll see that we need a description of how it's an everyday educational normal situation. And then we need to see your information letter. So it becomes much easier to research with minors if you're doing it within an existing normal everyday educational setting. So think about that as researchers, that if you are going to research in schools, it's much easier to get permission to get into that setting and get the help from the teacher and the principal to do research rather than to kind of scramble together a group of minors that you want to talk about. For some situations, obviously, you need to do that. If you want to talk about things that aren't education or school related, say you want to talk about, abuse or drug use or any of those kinds of topics, you're likely going to need to recruit them individually through their parents. So we have a lot of different ways that you can get approved. It just depends on the type of study that you're doing. Again, most of what we see is adults, typical recruitment informed consent, but we do have the sophistication in our application platform and in our processes to take and approve any number of different types of studies. They'll just require specific kinds of information from the applier and sometimes more information based upon what it is that you're doing. A couple of important reminders about our process. We need eligibility, recruitment, consent, and we need you to be able to complete an application, and we have group sessions for all four of those. So if you're having trouble putting together any of those components, please seek out our help, and then also you can register for office hours with us to ask any questions that you have as you go through it. Most of the time, answers are available on the website, but sometimes it's hard to interpret from just the written word. We've tried to include help videos, other kinds of modalities to kind of express the information that we have, but sometimes you just need to talk to somebody. And so we have the office hours. If you see that the office hours are full, please reach out to us at irb@nu.edu and we will accommodate you. This is what we do. So we have a certain number that come to us each week, and we try to schedule so that we don't waste our time. But we also know that at certain periods of the year, we have a lot of people who want to be working on their research. So please do reach out if you're finding that there is not availability for any of our services, and we will accommodate you. All right. Well, that's the presentation today, folks, and thanks for sticking it out if you did for the whole hour. I know sometimes it can be a little overwhelming to get all this information at once. We'll send you the recording. You can always revisit it, the PowerPoint presentation as well. And then, as I had mentioned earlier, we'll have a Q&A document based upon today's chat and Q&A that you can read through as well. And I want to thank you all for coming, and hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm going to turn back over to Dr. Spranger.
Thank you so much, Dr. Becker. The chat is exploding with thank yous very much. And also some people surprised to know there was this many resources through the IRB. So, because our students start at varying times, they don't know what they need to be aware of until they need to know. So, so I'm so grateful that we're able to offer these sessions through Skill Ups, but really contacting the IRB, I can't express enough how I would highly encourage to go to those small group sessions. Very informative. And it just helps as you're going through your process as a researcher. And thank you so much, Dr. Tribble. Hands are furiously typing away in response to all of these questions that come through the Q&A. I'm not sure if all the participants can see, but Dr. Tribble answered 20 questions during today's session. So thank you so much for your time and attention to that.
Well, thank you. Thanks everybody for your questions too. They were great questions.
Very good. And then I think, Dr. Becker, we may send out a survey on behalf of the IRB just to get a little bit of feedback from today's session, just so all of our participants know. You'll probably see one from the ATA as well too. And then next month we'll have another Skill Up. So keep your eyes open for that. And until the next time, I hope everybody has a great rest of their day and good luck in your research journey.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.